is positioning itself as a security provider for the Muslim countries, so to say. And then I think it is leading the talks, or it has been initiating certain suggestions like a Muslim NATO, and all these kinds of suggestions have come about. I really don't know how far these kinds of suggestions will be practical on the ground. The fact that the Israeli attacks on Qatar took place so close to the biggest US base in the region, and the US's own complicity is being suspected in the region. So I think that may have compelled the Saudis to reach out to Pakistan.
The Pakistan-Saudi Arabia Security Pact. It is going to have huge implications for India. What does it mean in terms of security, in terms of how India can respond to Pak terror, and how should India be looking and reading into this pact? To discuss this and more, I'm being joined by a very senior official, former diplomat in the Ministry of External Affairs. He retired as secretary, but also served as ambassador of India to Saudi Arabia, Dr. Ausaf Sayeed. Thank you so much, Ambassador Sayeed, for joining us here on India Today Global. Let's begin with the pact itself. How do you read the pact? What's the most startling part of this pact?
See, Geeta, there is a long-standing relationship between military and defense cooperation between Saudi Arabia and Pakistan, which actually goes back to several decades, especially in 70s and 80s. And Pakistan had put their soldiers' boots on the ground for many conflicts, like Gulf War and most recently in the Yemen thing. But having said that, it is not a sudden development as it may seem. This is being worked out for a long time, but I think the timing is very significant because, as you know, what would have triggered it is the recent Israeli airstrikes in Doha, and also putting a doubt in the minds of the Middle Eastern countries, particularly Saudi Arabia, who must be reassessing the security reliance on US. This is the background. So they must have been compelled to think about a kind of a joint deterrence. One, of course, the JCC itself has a mechanism for joint cooperation, but then they do not have the military capabilities themselves to kind of either deter Israel or Iran for that matter. So this is where I think the Pakistan has stepped in. So for Pakistan, it's a big boost in its cooperation, defense cooperation with all the Middle Eastern countries, but more so with Saudi Arabia, because it has elevated its relationship from a transactional nature, where it was providing some small arms and training, capacity building, and maybe some people on the ground, not more than 15 to 1600. But this has now elevated the partnership into a treaty level security environment. And this is also the first time that there is a nuclear dimension added to the Gulf security. So this is something which one needs to see in its perspective, how it is going to affect the regional stability, while it may act as a deterrent both against Israel and Iran, but at the same time it is aimed to stabilize the Arabian Peninsula. Now the question
a very important aspect before you go ahead, sir. The fact that you're adding nuclear dimension, there have been many reports in the past saying that Israel does possess nuclear weapons, even tactical nuclear weapons, so to speak. In such a scenario, looking at Israel now attacking and violating sovereignty of countries like Qatar, how does the nuclear dimension then work with Pakistan being added into the picture?
One is that, I think it is more of optics to show to Israel and also to convey to the message to the US that, the Gulf countries as strategic partners should not be taken for granted. The fact that the Israeli attacks on Qatar took place so close to the the biggest US base in the region, and the US's own complicity is being suspected in the region. So I think that may have compelled the Saudis to reach out to Pakistan, and nothing better than reaching out to a nuclear power, because that itself will be a deterrent. And Pakistan must have assured, a nuclear umbrella for Saudis and maybe later on to other countries, because you just see that in the last 1 week, a Pakistani Prime Minister made 3 visits in the region, 2 to Qatar, 1 immediately in the aftermath of the attack, 2nd to participate in the emergency meeting, and of course now is leading a high-level delegation to Saudi Arabia.
So, Dr. Sayeed, this is not a pact that could have been done overnight. The timing of the conclusion of the pact is quite interesting, but also the fact that it must have been in the works for some time. While it plays out well for Saudi Arabia at a time when Gulf countries are being attacked, it also plays well for Pakistan to show that they have a country, should they ever come under attack, that a country like Saudi Arabia will have to step in now.
Yes, Pakistan is positioning itself as a security provider for the Muslim countries, so to say. And then I think it is leading the talks, or it has been initiating certain suggestions like a Muslim NATO, and all these kinds of suggestions have come about. I really don't know how far these kinds of suggestions will be practical on the ground, but the fact that Pakistan has got a chance to make inroads and project itself as a net security provider in this very vital region, which is also of great significance to India, is a matter of concern to us, and we should not take this, I think, lightly. Although when we discuss the impact on India, although there has been reassurances from Saudi Arabia that this pact is not going to affect its ongoing cooperation with India on the counterterrorism, on the security and the defense side, but nevertheless, it adds a sudden, unsuspected element to the entire thing, and we need to kind of take stock of how this needs to be tackled.
Zooming out a little, Dr. Sayeed, the fact that during Operation Sindoor and post, there was a lot of optics that we saw from the Indian side as also from the Pakistani side, and a lot of people had started saying that Pakistan in this fight stands isolated. With what we're seeing now, it doesn't seem like Pak is isolated. It does seem like the timing for Pak to really show itself as an ally of such countries is quite clear over here.
Yes, I know. If you recall, a few years back, there were strains in the relationship between Pakistan and Saudi Arabia when Pakistan, along with certain other countries, tried to organize a conference in Malaysia. But that was a long time, and after that, I think there had been several high-level visits when Imran Khan was the Prime Minister, and things were sorted out. Now, the important dimension here is that it has really elevated the Pakistan's importance in the region, and also now Pakistan could expect that Saudi Arabia could invest, make huge investments in the Pakistani defense sector. There are speculations that these investments could go in the range of $10 to $15 billion. There could be joint manufacturing, and many other aspects are being talked about because their involvement, a formal Riyadh, Islamabad defense ties now elevated to a treaty level arrangement, has created a new axis, in the GCC security mosaic, and in which Pakistan would play a very important role. Now, in Saudi Arabia, which considered itself the legitimate voice of the Ummah and the custodian of the two holy mosques, it takes this step, to join hands with Pakistan at this level. It may convey certain signals to other countries in West Asia that to look at Pakistan as a credible defense partner. So this is one aspect of it, and I'm also this defense agreement. I'm also a little bit unclear about certain definitions. There is an ambiguity of definitions of aggression triggers. So will it be restricted to only state-to-state aggressions, like what we saw between Israel and Qatar recently, or will Pakistan try to leverage it and then twist it, in some other context, for example, in the context of cross-border terrorism, of which we are deeply concerned.
That's a very interesting point you put out, Dr. Said, because I was going to ask you this. Now, in Indian government's new policy or the dictum of an act of terror is an act of war. In such a scenario, will India now have to really give proof to these countries to say that, well, this is where the people came from, exact proof, detailing it out before even trying to go ahead and attack terror installations in Pakistan? Is that how it will work? That there'll have to be enough proof, and a proof that should be accepted by the other party before they can actually go in. Unlike what India did during Operation Sindoor, they just went in.
Yes, you see, during Operation Sindoor, of course, we did send delegations to various countries, including Gulf countries, to explain our position and, to convey our concerns. But then it's a matter of fact that none of these countries explicitly condemned Pakistan. They condemned acts of terrorism, but, fell short of naming Pakistan. Now, the wording in this, defense pact saying that an attack on one country is deemed as attack on the other. We need to see how this will translate if there is another response like Operation Sindoor in response to any other cross-border terrorism. Now, but having said that, I would say that Saudis would definitely continue to maintain strong ties with India, which we have been nurturing. We have been nurturing very strong counterterrorism and security dialogues with them, built since 2016 onwards. We have a comprehensive security dialogue, joint working group on counterterrorism, and many other things. And of course, we have naval cooperation and many other things. So our engagement with the Gulf countries, including Saudi Arabia, is multi-vector cooperation, energy, investment, diaspora, maritime security. So all this is on one side. So I don't think this particular pact which Saudi Arabia signed with Pakistan will in any way dilute, their engagement with India. But certainly complicates matters for us because we have to, keep this a factor, because now Pakistan has become a very important player there. So if there are certain, cross-border incidents which have happened, and we tend to blame the Pakistani, complicity in it, we have to, as you rightly say, have enough proof to convince the Gulf countries. So this is something which is there. Otherwise, I think the Saudi-Pakistani Defense Pact can easily coexist with the GCC-India cooperation and India-Saudi cooperation. So while we do not expect any easing from Saudi Arabia against non-state actors targeting India or Saudi Arabia itself, because the kingdom itself had been a victim of terrorism. But at the same time, we have to be cautious, treat cautiously on these matters, because I feel that our historical relationship with Saudi Arabia, if a situation arises like Pulwama, a kind of situation arises, God forbid, I would still firmly think that Saudi Arabia would act as a crisis manager or a mediator rather than a co-belligerent player acting against the Indian interests. So this is what I believe. Now, the question is, what should India do in this scenario? We have seen the Indian reaction which has come about, but I think what India should do is that maintain this the high level of strategic dialogue with Riyadh, and engage them with the nuances in this agreement, maybe come up with the definitions of it, or the aspects which seem to be ambiguous. So just for us to understand, further deepen our counterterrorism cooperation. All this is very important. Further, I think engage the GCC countries in maritime cooperation. So this is one thing which we need to do. For me, the bottom line is that while this pact solidifies the Riyadh Islamabad security alignment, and aims to deter external attacks. I do not think it is the kingdom is signaling any tilt against India. It is merely
Right.
an act of hedging and directed towards Israel and perhaps USA. But at the same time, it puts us a lot of pressure on us so that tomorrow, if there is some cross-border terrorism, we need to act more aggressively, more gather more strong evidence against Pakistan than what we had done so during the Operation Sindhu.
Two more questions before I let you go. One, you just mentioned United States of America. Now, there is distrust and mistrust because of the statements that came out post the attack on Qatar and what Marco Rubio said on Israeli soil. It seems like the Gulf countries cannot trust America for security. But on the other hand, can Saudi Arabia really go ahead with a defense pact with Pakistan without America's approval? I ask you this is because you've served in Saudi Arabia and you know how the country functions.
I think it would be naive to think that Saudi Arabia would completely disconnect, their defense relations with US. They will continue to be heavily dependent on US because of their capabilities and their involvement, which had been there historically. But at the same time, they have an alternative now. It's not that they are only depending on Saudi Arabia, on USA. If you recall, this thought had been there about hedging, in the Middle Eastern countries, and they have been actually looking at alternate players, because they thought that the oscillatory nature of the US, military diplomacy in the region. Now it is more and more evident that the US is more tilted towards Indo-Pacific rather than the Middle East itself. And the last example, if you could recollect, was the Houthi attack on the Aramco thing. During that time, US had explicitly told Saudi that, they cannot engage in someone else's war, and in fact, maybe ask them to foot the bill. And it was very half-hearted help. So that was the first shock which the Saudis have got. So since then, they had started looking at opportunities for looking at alternative mechanisms, while keeping their relationship with US intact, but then looking at other options. Then they started reaching to countries in Asia. China is one such country they reached out. But as you know that China doesn't normally get involved in any military conflict. So while China has been strengthening its economic cooperation and cultural cooperation and investments in the GCC and West Asia, but I think it's political mediation. The best example was the rapprochement between Saudi and Iran, and also in the most recently hosting a conference of various Palestinian factions. But beyond that, I don't think they would go any further. They would provide some equipment. They would provide training as Pakistan and India are doing. But I don't think they would engage themselves in and they'll put themselves in a situation where they are facing directly the US. So this is where we are. I think Saudis will continue to rely on the US, but at the same time opening their doors to other possibilities.
Right. And finally, before I let you go, do you think the impetus for this pact really comes from the fact that there is a certain kind of relationship that the Sharifs and the royal family of Saudi Arabia share?
Yes, to some extent, there is the families know each other for a long time. If you know, when the Sharif was exiled, he spent a lot of time in Saudi Arabia, mainly in Medina, and then so he was always around and in close proximity with the Saudi royal family. That would be one factor, but I really do not consider that would be the main factor. But because at the end of the day, Pakistan has been a very important military and defense partner of Saudi Arabia, as I mentioned at the beginning, for a long time. And so this would have this particular defense pact must be under discussion for several years now. But now that this particular trigger of Israeli Hamas conflict coming to the doorsteps of GCC would have really put everybody in a panic mode, and they would have decided to kind of conclude it and announce it publicly. And the timing is very important, just a couple of days after that incident.
On that note, Dr. Ausaf Sayeed, thank you so much for joining us here on India Today Global.
Thank you, Geeta. Thank you so much. See.